Do you remember when you were 14? When I was 14, I struggled with my mental health. I experienced self-harm and panic attacks. I went through these challenges alone because my family did not talk about mental health, leading me to feel ashamed about my struggles. This is my story and the story of many other young people in Vancouver and around the world. My name is Stephanie, this is Janani, and together with our teammates Katrina, Benta, and Hussein, we are Team Bridging the Gap.
As a team of second-generation immigrants with experience in public and mental health and youth outreach, we learned that our lived experience is part of a larger narrative, exploring the intersection of culture and mental health, the experience of a young person reconciling their familial culture with the dominant Canadian culture. Our research focused on young people aged 14 to 25 in Greater Vancouver. However, our findings show applicability in other environments where youth might face similar pressures. So through months of secondary research, 14 interviews with experts, 84 online survey responses from youth, but most importantly, 46 in-person qualitative interviews with second-gen youth themselves, we unpacked this issue's complexity. We looked at government and policy responses, community services on the ground, and real interactions between youth and their families.
So let's start by first understanding the root causes of this problem through an analysis of our own ethnographic research. At the core of well-being is a person's ability to cope with their mental health challenges. Academic literature over the last decade has studied various coping strategies, including suppression, avoiding the problem, accumulation of the problem, which is internalization, and avoidance, neglecting the problem. 72% of our interviewees shared that they utilize at least one of these three unhealthy coping strategies on a regular basis. What's even more important is that all of these are positively correlated with some serious challenges, including depression and eating disorders. But what's actually driving these unhealthy coping practices? Our own research led us to three key drivers.
The first driver is the difference in understanding of mental wellness between young people and their families. 86% of our interviewees shared with us that their parents would never understand their mental health struggles. Many Asian families hold on to a cultural or religious interpretation of mental wellness, and often this causes it to be highly taboo and stigmatized in the households. Many of our second-gen youth shared sentiments such as, mental health does not exist to my parents, or that they think bad mental health is solely due to a bad relationship with God. And these discrepancies often make it extremely difficult for young people to bring up these conversations in the household.
So our second key driver is based on the fact that 91% of our interviewees identified parental expectations as a source of heightened levels of stress. Many experience a lack of control around important mental stressors because their families control traditionally collectivist versus individualistic expectations around things like success, wealth, and family obligations. Overwhelmingly, our interviews reflected sentiments of shame and pressure because of these expectations. And lastly, our third key driver is this feeling of debt or burden that many second-gen youth experience because of their parents' sacrifices. Many first-generation immigrants experience traumas such as poverty, losing educational credentials, as well as separation from family, which is often internalized by second-gen youth as a debt that they owe towards their parents. Every single one of our 46 interviewees said that to avoid adding additional stressors to their parents, they would avoid conversations about their own challenges.
So given this, what solutions do our systems respond with now? We found that current solutions fall into four categories, and those are cross-cultural mental health services, immediate settlement services, educational institutions, and community responses. Recently, Vancouver Coastal Health, which is a health authority of the Greater Vancouver area, has pointed toward the need for cross-cultural mental health services. And so support groups have surfaced in hospitals and clinics. For instance, the cross-cultural psychiatric clinic at Vancouver General Hospital, which provides mental health assessments and treatments on a referral basis that are not only language-specific, but culture-specific as well.
Vancouver also offers a wealth of immediate settlement supports that approach mental health from a social determinants perspective. For example, Mosaic, a Vancouver newcomer organization, offers employment, English, and family services. So even though these do not directly address mental health, they act as healthy entry points because meeting the basic social and health needs of newcomers is crucial to mental health moving forward, as well as securing a strong foundation for their children. Educational institutions are also important because these are spaces where many young people spend a lot of their time. So British Columbia is currently implementing educational curriculum changes by 2020 to incorporate social and emotional learning within the own classrooms. Post-secondary institutions also have a lot of multicultural student groups. So at our own university, at Simon Fraser University, we have 46 cultural groups that exist. And lastly, post-secondary institutions offer services that are specific to students in high-stress situations. One counselor at SFU shared with us that they're actually trying to hire more people who can provide care within the context of different cultures.
Unique organizations also exist, like Check Your Head and Youth Empowering Parents, who promote advocacy, education, and empowerment. Check Your Head is a nonprofit based in Vancouver that uses a peer-to-peer education model where youth can seek solidarity in youth-centric spaces and explore how their voice fits within systemic advocacy on issues like migrant justice. So similarly, Youth Empowering Parents based out of Toronto trains young people with the skills and tools they need to then train adults with English and computer skills. And although we don't necessarily see the words mental health in these organizations' mission statements, we know that their work and their youth's involvement with the work is cultivating strong cultural identity, which is elemental to building their mental wellness.
So with this landscape, what are some of the key opportunities we can utilize moving forward? Our team researched four key gaps that we would like to talk about today. So the first is our community focus when designing these mental health programs. So although we offer a wealth of very important supports, most of these focus on initial settlement services and less on long-term, let alone second-gen youth mental health. Secondly, we are also missing a way to introduce this family dialogue around mental health within these families. Current cross-cultural services are trying to address this issue through increasing ethnic representation, as well as addressing the language barriers. Dr. Murphy from the University of British Columbia shared with us that services have been neglecting the importance of culture and diversity for too long, which creates a one-size-fits-all type of service for all the different cultures. One of the key needs of this population is the lack of mental health dialogue within their own families. So services must consider this at the forefront.
The third gap is the limited research and understanding of this issue in a Canadian context. Much of the literature related to this topic is either done in an American or Swedish context. And without Canadian-specific information, stakeholders here cannot be properly informed of the unique needs and challenges of this population in Vancouver specifically. The fourth gap is a lack of synergetic collaboration across stakeholders. Take, for instance, our interviews with public school educators, who shared with us that often they feel the onus is placed on them to facilitate discussions of culture and diversity and wellness, often in circumstances where they might not feel fully equipped with the cross-cultural tools that they have at hand.
So within the complexities of these gaps, our team came up with a few promising levers of change for all of our stakeholders. For the purpose of today, we'll be focusing on schools. As mentioned previously, these are spaces where young people spend anywhere from 7 to 12 hours a day, making them healthy entry points for leveraging change. So to prioritize second-gen youth mental health, post-secondary institutions can continue to enhance counseling services within the context of different cultures, but also supporting these student-driven multicultural groups by providing them with resources and spaces for them to form. To incorporate a component of family dialogue in spaces where parents, teachers, and students are already meeting can help bring in this dialogue while ensuring healthy coexistence of both cultures.
Since BC is already implementing curriculum changes to our education curriculum, we can help inform this change by conducting focus groups with our second-gen population and their families to help elevate our education system's understanding of different cultural understandings of what mental wellness can mean. Lastly, we can increase collaboration across stakeholders, specifically cross-cultural service providers and public school educators, so that both of these groups can help equip each other with the existing tools that they have to teach healthier coping strategies to second-gen youth.
As a team of second-generation immigrants, we have learned that our unique experience is part of a much larger youth narrative in Vancouver and around the world. I'm standing here 8 years later, shaped by some of the most difficult times of my life. Yet this continues to challenge myself and my family. Team Bridging the Gap is committed to work on this issue through continued education and proactive advocacy so that this story doesn't have to be the same for other second-generation youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a very, very insightful and powerful presentation, and you've made a very compelling case. I'm curious in terms of, in your research process, kind of understanding two aspects. One is, an important stakeholder are the immigrants, the parents themselves. So I was wondering if you can shed a little bit more insight in terms of, their understanding of mental health issues. What you mentioned, their cultural and religious backgrounds, but within, are there any differences between the different types of Asian immigrants, and what what kind of solutions are they willing to accept? That's the first question, and then the other question is with regard to ways of dealing with mental health issues. So a common area that people are concerned with is anonymity, and whether or not there, the cultural stigma around mental health, and that's something broader than just, with Asian Canadian youths. So can you speak a little bit more to the types of solutions that you found are able to address some of these concerns? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So I'll first start off by addressing that first question that you had. So just to preface a little bit, we have realized that this problem is a very complex system, and it involves two very important stakeholders, two groups. They're not necessarily stakeholders. These are people that are being influenced by this issue. Unfortunately, because of the complexity of this issue, we were not able to interview too many first-generation immigrants. We were able to speak to a few, but we do recognize that this is very important to understand their perspective and to see what types of solutions they are willing to participate in order for us to elevate any stakeholders that we have currently in order to create change, because we can't really change the status quo from just the second-generation perspective. So after this competition, we are hoping to fully gain an understanding of that first-generation perspective through qualitative interviews as well. Janai, did you have something to mention?
Right, and I'll just touch a little bit about the different perspectives on mental health of these two groups. So when we refer to Asian societies as collectivist societies, what we're referring to is the emphasis that they place on the collective over the individual. So often the welfare of the whole community or the whole family it supersedes the welfare of the individual, and this often means that individual mental health needs might be sacrificed because of the stigmatization of it in the culture. So we learned that framing of this issue and any future interventions must be appropriate to the ways that these different groups view the issue. So accessible framing is super important in any intervention, and this means not necessarily framing it as mental illness or mental ailments, but rather overall well-being and a more holistic view of what mental health can mean for their children. We know that something that is common among all families, regardless of ethnicity, is that they want their children to succeed. So something that we're trying to leverage is places where they're already congregating and convening. So for instance, planning for post-secondary educations or other development opportunities is places that teachers, parents, and their children are already coming together. So framing these discussions under a paradigm where we're trying to enhance their overall wellness instead of pinpointing certain ailments or aspects of mental health makes it accessible to all groups involved.
I'm just curious what it would look like to broach this conversation with family, or how, what does that feel like for you? What has this journey been like for you personally? And what does it look like going forward?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a very important question that we've also been struggling ourselves. I remember at Daniela's workshop yesterday with the courage question, we were telling ourselves that we need to bring this to our own homes as well, because these are issues that we don't speak upon very often, which just goes to show how complex and how difficult this system is, even for people who are relatively aware of this issue. This is something that we do hope to bring back to Canada into our own institution as well as our own families once we get back. It's something that we're very passionate about as second-gen youth ourselves. So definitely it's been difficult, but there is hope for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. And also another ideological barrier sort of that we struggled with in the beginning of this process was this notion that we can't change cultures. And this is absolutely right in its assertion that we can't impose a biomedical understanding of wellness onto more culturally informed ways of knowing this. So this made us feel stuck initially at the beginning of our process, because what has held the status quo in place is kind of imposing this Western biomedical model on different ethnic minorities. So we thought that since the status quo is so stagnant, this is the only way to approach this problem. But we found that we need to find pockets of shared understanding between families, and these are exactly the places where we can intervene and have most durable change.
Great, I think that's all from us. Thank you very much. Again, it was great for a number of us who have already seen you speak, but again, we learned something new as well from this second time round. So thanks very much for presenting this really important topic to us. Well done, all of you.
Thank you.